Over 2,500 years ago, a Greek poet named Simonides of Chios attended a grand banquet. Midway through the evening, he suddenly stepped outside, and moments later, the hall collapsed, killing everyone inside. The bodies were crushed beyond recognition. Yet Simonides could identify every victim simply by recalling where each person had been seated. That single moment changed history. Simonides had discovered the principle of the memory palace, the idea that our minds remember best when we link information to vivid places and images. Centuries later, memory champions still use this technique to accomplish unbelievable feats. But here's the truth. You don't need to memorize a deck of cards or win a memory competition. What you do need is the kind of memory that helps in everyday life, remembering names and faces, keeping track of important facts, recalling conversations, and holding on to the knowledge that shapes your future. In this summary of memory, how to develop, train, and use it, you'll learn how to sharpen your powers of attention, train your eyes and ears, remember names and faces, store facts and daily events, and even commit books and lessons to memory. Most importantly, you'll discover that memory is not a fixed gift. It's a skill you can strengthen with practice. And before we dive in, a quick reminder. On this channel, you'll find over 200 audiobook summaries covering the best books on success, wealth, mindset, productivity, and personal growth. Every single one is free for you to learn from anytime, anywhere. So, if you're ready, let's unlock the secrets of memory and explore how you can train your mind to never forget what truly matters. Attention. Think of your memory as a great book, one that is constantly being written in the library of your subconscious mind. Every time you experience something, the event is like a line of text recorded on its pages. But whether that line is sharp and clear or faint and unreadable depends on one key factor: attention. The English poet Martin Tupper once remarked, "Attention is the mother of memory." When you give an experience your complete focus, it etches itself vividly into your mind. When your attention drifts, the memory is often weak or incomplete. Most cases of poor memory are not the result of a weak brain, but of poor attention, and poor attention usually comes from lack of interest. Notice how easy it is to recall the details of something you're passionate about, even without trying. This is known as involuntary attention, a natural, effortless focus that happens when your curiosity is fully engaged. By contrast, voluntary attention is when you consciously direct your focus to something that may not seem interesting at first. This type of attention must be trained. The challenge is to deliberately create interest in ordinary things, so your mind learns the habit of noticing. One way to practice is by observing the details of everyday objects. Pick up a book from your shelf, notice its title page, the font style, the number of chapters, the texture of the paper, even the design of the cover. Such small exercises may seem trivial, but over time they condition your mind to notice details automatically. Consider the story of James, a state council politician. He often embarrassed himself by failing to recognize important people at meetings. His memory wasn't failing him. His attention was. He would glance at a face once and try to memorize it, but without paying attention to unique features, the image faded quickly. After facing repeated complaints, James decided to change. He trained himself to observe carefully the color of someone's hair, the lines of their smile, the shape of their mouth, even the shade of their teeth. By focusing on such details, he soon found it far easier to remember people accurately. What once felt impossible became second nature. This example illustrates 3 essential rules for building voluntary attention. Develop genuine interest. Convince yourself that remembering is important. Focus on details. Small observations make memories more distinct. Command your mind. Consciously instruct your subconscious not to forget. With practice, this becomes effortless. But attention alone isn't enough. For memory to work well, it needs another partner: association. Attention stores the memory, but association gives you a clear path back to it later. As philosopher John Stuart Mill put it, association is to psychology what gravity is to physics. Association works through two main laws. Law of contiguity. One idea naturally connects to the next in sequence. For instance, you can easily recite the alphabet from A to Z because each letter cues the next. But if asked to recite it backwards, or to instantly name the 13th letter, most people struggle. The reason is that your memory for the alphabet is chained by contiguity. You rely on the order to retrieve each piece. Law of similarity. The mind links new things with old ones that resemble them. Imagine seeing a pomelo, a large, sweet, citrus fruit. If you've never encountered it before, you might associate it with a lemon because of its shape and color, and mistakenly call it a sweet lemon. A well-trained mind constantly builds meaningful associations, creating a strong chain of connected memories. Each link reinforces the next, making recall easier. But be careful. Random or shallow associations can lead to confusion. The goal is to form deliberate, logical connections that make your memories reliable and precise. Training the eyes and ears. When people complain about having a poor memory, the real problem is not always the memory itself. Often, it's that they never truly noticed the thing they're trying to recall. For example, picture a cow. Can you describe exactly where its ears are positioned in relation to its horns? Behind, in front, above, or below? Most people hesitate, not because they lack memory, but because they never paid attention in the first place. Your eyes may take in countless images every day, yet if you don't consciously register them, they vanish without leaving a trace. The first step toward a strong memory, then, is to train your powers of observation. This is not a mysterious gift, it is a skill, and like any skill, it can be improved. A striking illustration comes from early 20th century Europe, and what was grimly called the School of Thieves. Young boys were trained to notice every detail of an object or a room. They practiced by quickly scanning small items and later describing them in perfect detail. This ability later allowed them to memorize the layout of homes they intended to rob: windows, doors, locks, and latches, all from a single glance when disguised as beggars. While the purpose here was criminal, the lesson is valuable. Sharp observation can be developed. And it's not limited to thieves. A cricketer visiting a new ground quickly memorizes the pitch and field. An actor who attends a play can recall its details vividly. Why? Because interest and expertise sharpen attention, and attention fuels memory. You can build this skill yourself with simple exercises. Try using dice. Roll one die, study the pattern of dots for 2 seconds, then set it aside and recall the number. Once this feels easy, try 2 dice, then 3, gradually increasing the challenge. With practice, not only will you remember more dice at once, but you'll also reduce the time it takes to lock each pattern into memory. The same principle applies to listening. Many children grow up frustrated that they can't recall what teachers said, not because their ears failed, but because their minds wandered. Human attention naturally filters sounds, keeping what feels relevant and discarding the rest. Think of a mother. She can instantly recognize the faintest cry of her baby, yet barely notices the roar of a truck outside. Interest tunes the ear. Imagine yourself walking through a village. The barking of dogs, the lowing of cattle, birds calling from trees, wind rustling the leaves, a motorcycle passing on the dirt road. If you choose to focus on one sound, the rest fade into the background. Ignore them all, and you hear nothing but a blur of noise. To strengthen auditory memory, start small. In your next conversation, challenge yourself to recall the very first sentence spoken. When watching a movie, pay attention to the opening lines of each character, and after the film ends, test yourself by repeating them. At first, this will feel impossible, but gradually your brain will adapt, and lines will come back with surprising clarity. The power of listening extends beyond words. A skilled doctor can detect illness from the sound of a patient's breathing. An experienced engineer can diagnose a machine's problem simply by the way it hums or rattles. By training yourself to notice subtle details in sound, you build a subconscious awareness that enriches your daily life. Soon, you'll catch the rhythm of footsteps behind you, the shift in tone of a friend's voice, or the faintest crack in a wall before it breaks. In short, memory begins with attention, and attention begins with training the senses. By sharpening your eyes and ears, you give your mind the raw material it needs to build a reliable memory. How to remember names. Forgetting the names and faces of people you meet is one of the most common and most embarrassing memory lapses. Yet if you observe the world's most successful leaders, politicians, and business people, you'll notice many of them excel at this very skill. Napoleon Bonaparte reportedly knew the name of every soldier under his command, and the Roman general Lucius Scipio could recognize every citizen of Rome. Some individuals seem to have a natural gift for remembering names, but the truth is, almost everyone has far greater capacity than they realize. Most people don't even use 1% of their potential. The real obstacle isn't ability, it's lack of interest. The human mind simply doesn't find names exciting enough to pay attention to. Consider the story of John Smith, a banker in London. In his youth, he constantly forgot the names of even his wealthiest clients, which created awkward situations. But over time, Smith transformed his weakness into a strength that made his colleagues envious. Today, he remembers every person who walks through his bank's doors. How did he do it? His method was simple, but it demanded effort. First, he forced himself to listen carefully whenever someone introduced themselves, paying close attention to the exact sound of the name, the speaker's accent, and even their tone of voice. He realized that much of his forgetting came from never truly hearing the name correctly in the first place. Next, he turned remembering names into a hobby. Like a stamp collector, he kept a personal journal where he wrote down every name he encountered. He categorized them. Names like lion and wolf went into an animal group, while Miller, Baker, and Cooper went into professions. He studied the origins of surnames and the regions they came from. Over time, Smith became something of an amateur historian of names. The payoff was enormous. By building associations, he could instantly connect a new name with a category, making it easy to recall. Clients were delighted when he greeted them personally, and many requested to work with him exclusively. His reputation grew, and eventually the bank rewarded him with promotions and a higher salary. Of course, you may not want to study names with the same intensity, but you can still practice by collecting names in your mind and forming simple associations. Even small efforts will improve your ability to recall them. But remembering names alone isn't enough. You must also remember faces. Professions such as journalists, lawyers, and detectives demand this skill. Yet many of us forget a new face within minutes of meeting someone. One historical figure who excelled at face memory was Henry Clay, an American statesman. At a political rally in Mississippi, an elderly man with one eye approached him and asked, "Have we met before?" Clay paused and asked if their meeting had been in Kentucky. When the man confirmed, Clay followed up, "And you lost your eye some time after that, didn't you?" Again the man agreed. Clay's keen memory for faces impressed everyone who witnessed the exchange. The secret here is the same as with names. Develop interest. Most people can easily recall the face of someone they find striking or attractive, but they quickly forget ordinary ones. To train yourself, you must learn to notice subtle details in every face you see. Artists have long mastered this practice. Leonardo da Vinci, for example, broke faces down into their parts: eyes, nose, mouth, chin, ears. He studied the countless variations. Eyes could be wide or narrow, brown or green. Noses could be flat, sharp, or curved. By memorizing just a handful of these features, he could recall a face with great accuracy. You don't need to become an artist, but you can use the same principle. Start small. Pay attention to the shape of a nose, the tilt of someone's eyes, the curve of their mouth. Categorize these variations in your mind. With a little practice, even ordinary faces will become distinct and unforgettable. In short, the ability to remember names and faces isn't a rare gift. It's the product of attention, association, and practice. Anyone willing to cultivate interest and observe carefully can master it, and the rewards in personal and professional life are immense. How to remember events and facts. Pause for a moment and think back to yesterday. Can you clearly recall what you had for breakfast, what conversations you had, or the sequence of things you did throughout the day? For many people, even the events of yesterday seem hazy or slip away completely. Now imagine being called to court as a witness. Could you confidently testify about what you saw or did? The truth is, most of us put little effort into storing the routine events of our lives. This doesn't mean we should obsess over every small detail of the past, but it does mean that we ought to keep hold of the experiences that may prove useful later. Forgetting because it's boring is not wisdom. It's negligence. It's like a business deleting its financial records just to free up space, and then discovering later that those records were essential. A powerful example comes from Thurlow Weed, a 19th century printer who also became a political advisor and newspaper publisher. In his early career, Weed struggled with memory. He missed appointments and forgot important conversations to the point where friends told him he would never succeed in politics. Discouraged, he thought about returning to printing, until his wife Catherine urged him to train his memory instead of giving up. Taking her advice, Weed began a nightly exercise. For 15 minutes each evening, he sat quietly and replayed the entire day in his mind: what he had eaten, whom he had met, what documents he had written, and what conversations had taken place. At first, he saw little improvement, but within 2 weeks, he began noticing dramatic changes. Details that once vanished now stayed vivid. His wife encouraged the practice by asking him to narrate each day to her over supper. Weed kept this habit for the next 50 years. Far from being a chore, it became a source of joy as he watched his memory grow sharper year after year. What made this method so effective? It applied 2 principles we've already seen: attention and association. Knowing he would have to recount the day to Catherine forced Weed to pay attention as events happened, and as he narrated them, he naturally created associations between moments, conversations, and people, making recall easier. Events come and go, but facts are different. Facts are pieces of knowledge about specific topics, and they form the foundation of education, professions, and daily decision-making. Students rely on them for exams. Professionals rely on them for work. Yet even though we devote time and effort to memorizing facts, they often slip away. Why? Because they are not organized properly in the mind. Trying to memorize facts without order is like arranging the pages of a book upside down. No matter how hard you try, you can't make sense of it. The importance of order was once stressed by George Sharpswood, a U.S. Supreme Court judge. He observed that just knowing the law is of little use. What matters is knowing where to find it. In other words, facts are only valuable if they're stored in a way that allows you to access them when needed. So how do you organize facts for long-term memory? The method goes back to Plato and Socrates. They trained their students by asking a series of questions that forced them to connect new information with what they already knew. You can apply the same technique today. When you encounter a new fact, ask yourself questions such as, have I heard this before? If so, when, where, and from whom? What does this fact remind me of? What was my first impression of it? How does it fit into my general knowledge of the subject? What can be proven or explained using this fact? Where did it come from? And what is its history? What future implications might it have? What qualities define it? And how can it be applied in real life? Not every question will apply to every fact, but answering even a few creates multiple connections in your mind. Each fact becomes linked to a web of related ideas, 10 or more associations instead of standing alone. This makes the fact easier to retrieve and also strengthens your recall of older knowledge you may have forgotten. Think of it this way. The more often you use a memory, the easier it becomes to access, just like your phone, which you always know how to find. But an object you rarely touch, like a box in the attic, takes much longer to locate. By practicing attention and association, you ensure that the facts you need are always close at hand. How to remember books. In ancient times, before the printing press or the internet, knowledge had to survive through memory alone. People preserved sacred teachings and great stories by committing them to heart. Entire Hebrew scriptures and Hindu texts were passed down for centuries by oral tradition, proving how powerful human memory can be when trained. Today, we don't have to memorize texts, but it remains an invaluable skill. Literature students often commit poems and passages to memory. Public speakers memorize their speeches to deliver them naturally. Event hosts memorize guest details to avoid leaning too heavily on notes. Strengthening this ability makes you sharper, more confident, and more articulate in nearly any field. But memorizing long passages isn't easy. It requires time and discipline. Memory is like a muscle. The more you challenge it, the stronger it grows. One powerful method is to push your memory to its limits through structured practice. Start with a single verse or paragraph from a book. It might be a passage from the Bible, Edwin Arnold's Light of Asia, or a stanza from Shakespeare, or Walter Scott's The Lady of the Lake. On the first day, study the verse closely. Every word, punctuation mark, and even capitalization. Don't move on until you can recite it flawlessly. On the second day, review the first verse, then add a second. At the end of the day, repeat both together. On the third day, review the first two and add a third. Continue this pattern daily. After a month, you'll have memorized 30 verses. At this point, begin adding 2 verses per day, gradually increasing as your capacity grows. Eventually, you'll hit a natural limit, perhaps 4 verses per day. Maintain that pace, finish the book, and then move to a new one, all while occasionally revisiting the old. With time, you'll notice 2 major improvements. Speed. You'll require less time to commit something new to memory. Capacity. You'll be able to hold much larger volumes of information in your mind at once. This practice introduces the 3rd great element of memory, repetition. Attention makes you notice. Association connects new material to what you already know, and repetition ingrains it permanently. Of course, memorization doesn't always mean remembering every single word. Often, grasping the main idea is enough. Yet many people struggle even here. They can't recall the summary of a book they read last month or the notes they wrote last week. For narrative books, whether fiction, history, or biography, the key is visualization. Imagine the characters vividly. Picture the settings clearly. When the story comes alive in your imagination, you retain it far better, and reading itself becomes more engaging. If a poorly written book fails to spark these mental images, take it as a sign. Choose better books that nourish your memory and imagination. At the end of each book, pause and review the story. Recap the main events, the characters, and the outcome. This simple reflection helps lock the entire plot into long-term memory. For short stories, focus on the central message. Every tale carries a lesson or theme. Identify it and then see how the characters and events support it. Once the main point is clear, the rest of the story aligns naturally in your memory. Scientific texts require an even slower, more deliberate approach. Each paragraph may contain dense information. Break the material into smaller chunks. Don't advance to the next section until you fully understand the one before. At first, this may feel slow, but in truth, you save time, because forgetting and relearning costs far more. The same principle applies to lectures. Taking notes is essential, but notes alone aren't enough. Review them immediately after class while the memory is still fresh. Revisit them again later, reinforcing the material until it becomes second nature. By combining attention, association, and repetition, and by adapting your method to the type of material, you can transform the way you read, study, and learn. Books will no longer slip from your mind. Instead, they will become lasting companions in your memory. Conclusion. Throughout this journey, we explored the foundations of memory and the practical ways to strengthen it. Let's bring it all together. First, you learned the 2 great principles of memory: attention and association. Paying attention ensures that experiences are actually recorded, while association creates pathways that allow you to retrieve them later. Without attention, nothing is stored. Without association, nothing is found. Second, we discussed how to train your eyes and ears. Many people forget not because their memory is weak, but because they never truly observe. By slowing down and noticing details, the layout of a room, the sound of a voice, you begin to store experiences more deeply. Third, we covered techniques to remember names and faces. Names can be collected, categorized, and associated with images or origins. Faces can be broken into parts: eyes, nose, chin, and remembered through careful study. With practice, both become second nature. Fourth, we looked at remembering facts and daily events. This is where the 3rd principle enters: repetition. By reviewing your day or by asking probing questions about new information, when, where, why, and how, you multiply associations and strengthen recall. Fifth, you discovered how to remember texts and lessons by memorizing verses step by step, building gradually, and visualizing stories. You challenge your memory to grow stronger. For scientific or complex material, breaking it into smaller parts ensures true understanding before moving on. At its core, memory is not a fixed talent. It is a trainable skill. Just like a muscle, it grows stronger the more you use it, and it influences every part of your life, your studies, your career, your relationships, even your confidence. The methods you've learned, attention, association, and repetition, are not quick tricks. They are lifelong tools. If you apply them with patience and consistency, your memory will rise to new heights. Forgetfulness will no longer hold you back. Instead, you'll carry with you a sharper mind, a richer understanding, and the confidence that what matters most will never slip away. And that wraps up Memory: How to Develop, Train, and Use It by William Walker Atkinson. I hope this summary has sparked new ways of thinking about attention, association, repetition, and how you can strengthen your memory with daily practice. But don't stop here. On this channel, you'll find over 200 audiobook summaries covering the best books on success, wealth, mindset, productivity, and personal growth. Every single one is free for you to learn from, anytime, anywhere. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next summary we publish. And if you found one key takeaway from this book, drop it in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you'll use it in your own journey. Remember, knowledge is power only when you apply it. So take what you've learned today, start putting it into action, and explore the other summaries here. You never know which book might inspire your next big breakthrough. Thanks for listening. Keep learning, and I'll see you in the next summary.